Us now from our Kenya studios, or rather the studios in Nairobi, capital city of Kenya, is Gitobu Imanyara, democracy activist. Gitobu, we're just discussing Madiba's legacy, and no doubt it spreads far and wide. What's the mood like in Nairobi at the moment?
Of course, Nelson Mandela was one of the most well-known freedom fighters, not only in Kenya, but the whole of Africa. And we woke up to this news this morning that Mandela was no more. And as I woke up out of bed, I thought of the many things about Mandela. And for an African continent that has often been seen as the basket case of human race, this has been truly the century of one man who stood out, a man who shows by action that the ideals for which you stand for can be achieved by the sheer force of your own personality and belief. Mandela will live in the minds and the spirit of the African people for centuries. And I recall, most vividly myself, in the early 90s when I met him for the first time in Prague, under circumstances that were really unique, in the sense that the year before I had been due to go to Athens to receive an award, a democracy award, and the leadership in Kenya wouldn't allow me to travel. So when Mandela was released from prison and he was invited to Prague by the World Association of Newspapers to speak at the Golden Pen award ceremonies, I was invited, and I remember sitting over dinner with Mandela, and the simplicity and the humility of the man when you're sitting next to him and thinking of this towering giant of the century, a man who single-handedly led the freedom struggle and the ideals for freedom in the entire African continent. And I remember every day that I spent, this is a man who spent 27 years in prison. I spent close to 27 months in prison. And during those 27 months, I used to wonder how one man could live day and day for 27 years without flinching, without one day saying that it has not been worth it. And then I remember this is a giant of a man who will forever be remembered by all Africans and indeed all humanity as one of the most important people that ever visited this earth. We in Kenya, at a time like now when we are going through a period of introspection with regard to media freedom, I recall yesterday I was thinking of how to respond to the government's crackdown on media by enacting laws that are very repressive. And I couldn't but remember the words of Nelson Mandela when he spoke at a media conference in Prague, talking about the need for critical media that is central to freedom, central to democracy, and central to enjoyment of the liberties. And to me, we celebrate the life of a man that forever will be remembered for a great contribution to the force of liberty in the world.
Gitobu, no doubt sitting next to Nelson Mandela at the dinner table, that an interesting conversation must have been inspired there. Can you share with us some of the words that he shared with you and that I'm quite certain you hung on to?
First of all, of course, Mandela, here he was sitting, and I was humbled together with a number of colleagues that had been recipients of the Golden Pen of Freedom Award, and he was talking about great South African journalists. I remember he talked about Percy Koboza, and then he looked at me and he asked me, why is it that you felt the need to speak out? And I said, all the time that I have been living here, I've been reading about you, I've been studying your words, and you have been an inspiration not only to me during those days as a student leader at the university, as an editor and a publisher, but also as a fellow freedom fighter, because you have set the goals, the ideals for which you've stood for are the ideals that will make African continent truly free. And he spoke so humbly, without raising his voice, And then as he took his name plaque to autograph for those of us who are sitting around him, I wondered whether this is the real Mandela that I'd been reading about in the history books, that I've been studying at the university, whose speeches I've been quoting in my speeches at the university. Here sitting next to him, such a person, you know, it's one of those moments in life that you cherish forever. And that is Mandela to all of us who knew him, who read about him, who will remember him as a person who gave the African continent dignity.
Gitobu, thank you so much for sharing those interesting insights with us.